Okay, I would like to get started. So we're very fortunate today to have Debra Lieberman with us from the University of California, Santa Barbara. She heads the Center for Games and Health, or Digital Games and Health?
Center for Digital Games Research.
Digital Games Research. And basically, it's a field I think many of us here across campus are extremely interested in. The medical school in particular, and also in computer science and engineering too. So we have a very varied crowd here today. And well, let me just talk about the speaker. And I'll have to read this. You have too many accolades here. Debra Lieberman is a media researcher at UC Santa Barbara, where she teaches in the Department of Communication and directs the University Center for Digital Games Research. From 2007 to 2013, at UC Santa Barbara, she directed Health Games Research, a national program funded by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation to advance the research, design, and effectiveness of health games. Debra's research focuses on processes of motivation, learning, and behavior change with digital media and games. She also consults for health organizations, education agencies, and media and technology companies to improve user engagement and to help design and evaluate digital media and games for entertainment, learning, and health for people of all ages. She has consulted for Apple, Broderbund, Disney, Kaiser Permanente, Knowledge Adventure, Hope Lab, The Learning Company, Philips Healthcare, Pixar, Web TV, wow, long list, Zoe Entertainment, and others. Prior to UC Santa Barbara, Debra was VP of Research at Click Health, where she directed the research and design of health video games made for the Super Nintendo console. You should tell them a little bit about your Nintendo experience. It was fun.
Okay.
And prior to that, she was a faculty member of the Department of Telecommunications at Indiana University Bloomington. Debra holds an Master's in Education, specializing in media and learning from the Harvard Graduate School of Education, where she worked with Sesame Street researchers and producers to develop educational TV games for children, and she holds a Ph.D. in communications research from Stanford University. Debra, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Great to see all of you. I love all the different departments you're from. Well, I have a lot of slides, and so I'm going to go through them fairly quickly because I really want to talk with all of you. And just kind of, my slides are going to get the conversation going, give you a little bit of background. It's a combination of, why games, but I think this crowd knows why games. Oftentimes I'm talking to groups of people who've never even considered the use of the games for learning or for health. Oh, yeah. And then a few exemplary health games that have been studied in nice randomized controlled trials to find outcomes, because that's what we all want to know is, do they work, for whom? And then I just kind of go on a little bit about our field, where we draw our research from. So I'll go quickly through that. I don't think you want to sit through all these slides. Just a little bit more to set the stage. I mean, my whole career has been focused on the design of media to do good things for people. And I was so thrilled to be, right out of undergrad, to start working with the Sesame Street researchers at the Harvard Grad School of Education, where we learned to design television for children, and the Muppets came and taught our courses, and Chuck Jones, who was the animator, the director for the Bugs Bunny cartoons, and the real blend of entertainment and learning, and which is so exciting. And those were the days before we ever even had desktop computers. So fast forward 6 more years, and the desktop arrived, and I said I want to become an expert in that interactivity. So then I got my Ph.D. in communication, looking at interactivity as a driving concept for my studies of how do people respond to interactive media, how do you design it well, all of that kind of thing. And in the meantime, I was consulting, for the Reader Rabbit series and for my very first software. And, I just was in the right place at the right time to really be one of those social scientists at the table with a team of designing media. So I learned a lot about the realities, and so it made me a better consultant. And I also brought that scientific, theory-driven, evidence-based knowledge to the table. And I still feel that there's not enough of that out there. In our academic programs for our undergrads and master's students who are learning to design games or any kind of media. And as a consultant, I'm very good at not using jargon, but saying, based on what I know, here's a very typical thing. People trying to save money and they're making a game they want everybody to love. So they make a character who is gender neutral, neither male nor female. And that's just absolutely the wrong way to go, and I can cite research about that. It's got to have a gender, and in fact, when you design media, the characteristics of your character ought to be very specific and almost exaggerated in order audiences kind of expect that. And so there's something as simple as that to, wait a minute, your target age group is preschoolers. Well, the age level of what you're designing, Disney, is for second graders. Let's dial it way back. All kinds of things like that. And we would love to see more of that knowledge base be used in the design of media. And then in the early 1990s, I was invited to be that VP of research for Click Health, which was a young CEO who said, I think console video games are a great way to improve health behaviors. And you've been working in the learning field for so long, come to our company and make it work. And that to me was the best academic job I could have, because I was going to get NIH grants and I was going to do a huge literature review and base every decision on the most current knowledge we have. And granted, as we all know, there are a lot of gaps in our knowledge and we just make our educated guess as to what to do. But to the extent that we can either find research or do some of our own research to answer our questions, that's what I like to do. And then I have some slides about the games we developed and some of our great outcomes in our randomized controlled trials. And I'll show you on the slides. But the other piece of that is that I really got involved in the idea of health games and really pushing for behavior change, not just learning. I still see people thinking of games as a way to learn. So I was contacted yesterday by this incredible group of people working with the Nature Conservancy and a number of environmental groups who have decided they want to make a climate game. And so they're going to have a 3-day workshop. I'm going to attend. I'm going to help them. And the whole thing is, how can we improve people's knowledge about climate, right? And so I am kind of shaking their world up by saying, we know knowledge is a good thing, but knowledge doesn't change behavior all the time. There are other ways to do it. Getting someone's perception of risk to be more extreme than maybe it is. Or personalizing the situation, giving them an immersive experience, giving them practice developing skills, socially connecting with people who care, and developing self-efficacy to carry out skills that you can rehearse in a virtual world. So I hope that when I'm helping them, we're going to make a game for behavior change to get people to act on climate issues and not just be knowledgeable about it. So that's how I'll set the stage with you, and let me do my quick dog and pony show here. I love this proverb: tell me and I forget, show me and I remember, involve me and I understand. Because what I love about games is that they're experiences. And I don't know how many of you are aware of the work of Byron Reeves and Cliff Nass, the media equation, but they've done a series of experiments to show that people interact with technology in a very social and natural way. That's all we know. All we know how to interact is like how we interact with other people. So we are polite to technology. We have expectations about interfaces. Our emotions are deep and arousing and real in mediated environments. And that's very exciting to me as someone who's trying to change behavior and boost knowledge and attitudes, because these experiences are very realistic in games. My personal interest in research right now is making media as personalized as possible. We want the person to feel like they are in the environment. I'm really fascinated with all the work that's going on with avatars and making avatars look like you. Jeremy Bailenson at Stanford is doing some great work in that area. I also am interested in how we learn in relation to our own situation. So how do you make the game more personalized? And now with today's technologies and speed and memory, we can individualize and personalize cheaper and better than ever before. I don't have to tell you that we're active users of media now, and it's not uncommon for people to have a second screen when they're watching TV. and interacting while they're sitting back and watching a show, but then they're leaning forward and interacting with their tablet or their phone. And I wanted to quickly tell you about a study I did 20 years ago with kids ages 6 to 11. Actually, it was a low-income area in East Palo Alto. And I took each kid one at a time so that they wouldn't influence each other. And I simply asked, if you could learn with a book, a video, or a video game, what would you choose? And 49 out of the 50 said, oh, video game, without missing a beat. And then I said, why? Because you think, well, that's kind of like a superficial answer. Video games are more fun, right? And they're very serious, saying things like, well, a video game lets you try things out. I mean, it was like, why are you even asking me this? A book can explain, but you have the experience in a video game. A video game tells you when you're wrong. And these are 6 and 7-year-olds, they're 20 years ago saying this. They really get it, And if you study the literature on, the gamer psychology, in games you're expecting to have a really difficult challenge, and you expect to lose. And losing is kind of part of the fun, and you're losing and getting better and better. You might know about flow theory, where when we're in a peak experience, we want to be in that zone where our task is challenging but not impossible, and challenging enough so that it's not boring. And so, as we all know, games can adapt as the player gets better and better and keep you in that optimal zone. And these kids understood that. For those researchers out there who want definitions, for my research purposes, I simply call a game any rule-based activity that involves challenge to reach a goal. And when you get feedback on your progress toward the goal. And other than that, games are media. So all of the bells and whistles of media that we have to choose from, the platforms, the genres, the design, artwork and so forth, are completely up to you. But if you have some kind of challenge, it's a game. And it doesn't have to look like a console game. It can be a little question. It can be a mystery to solve. It can be just something that you're trying to do that motivates you toward reaching your goal. And another great thing about games is that when the game is really engaging, people will work very hard and very long to win a game. For those of you who are working with stroke victims and therapies for them, we see again and again that a game immerses them in an activity that makes them forget a little bit about how much pain it is to, let's say, get more extension of their arms and to work those muscles and to think about coordinating. And they're actually perceiving less time, less effort, less pain than they actually have because the game carried them through so far. And we also found in a game I'll be telling you about diabetes self-management for kids and another one for asthma self-management. The health goals are aligned with the game goals. So we design those games so that you have to keep your character healthy. So it wasn't that they were inherently interested in that challenge of keeping Bronchi's asthma at the peak level, but Bronchi would not be able to win all the other game challenges if his peak flow is getting low and he's wheezing. So yeah, they're on board. They want Bronchi to be healthy. So that's a very important aspect of the game mechanics that drive health games, some health games anyway. And then for more of a lay audience, I have a bunch of photos that I like to show. And I can talk theory and research about any one of these slides, but I'll go through them quickly. Games are powerful experiences, experiential hands-on learning. And in fact, one of the aha moments for me was, as a communication researcher, I was studying all kinds of effects of video games and media, including violent content. And the research on violence in the media is pretty compelling. It's one of the most studied areas in our field, and it consistently shows that violence in the media makes people anxious. It desensitizes them to violence in their world around them. It makes them think that violence or aggression or bullying, is a reasonable way to solve problems. And in some people, it makes them actually be aggressive or violent. And so I said, well, a video game is a perfect laboratory for building, a violent, fearful, desensitized person, because you've got feedback toward a goal. The goal inherently is to be violent. And so you get rewarded when you're, with points or with level ups when you're violent. And the cause and effect in a violent game is you're cool if you're violent. So all of these things are teaching you to be violent. Well, what if you were cool doing something like taking care of your health instead of being violent? So I just said, let's flip that around. Interactive, and my pictures show people of all ages. That's really important. I think there's a lot of assumption. When we had health games research for 6 years, everyone assumed that we were making games for kids. Especially my background was with kids, but no, Americans of all ages play games. And I've recently done a nationwide survey of 3,800 Americans, a representative sample survey, ages 1 to 93, and their video game usage. And I did in 2010 and 2013. And first of all, you'll see increases in the percent of people who play games, the minutes per day they play games, the platforms they use, everything's on the upswing. But the fastest growing group is older folks, especially older women. So everybody plays, now especially that we have the Wii and the Kinect that have a very natural interface that you don't have to know how to press an A and the B button and so forth. Very immersive, challenging, motivating. That challenge to reach a goal, I think, is key. Mission-driven, goal-driven. Some games really have that moment of triumph where you aced it, and people will work for hours, days, years to get to that moment, right? They're really rewarding and fun. I mean, a well-designed game. And one problem with our field of health games, there are hundreds and hundreds, thousands really, of health games now. But so many of them are just not fun. And Magda and I were talking about how, you get an NIH grant, there's a tiny budget to make a game, and the PI doesn't know how to make a game, and so maybe if you're smart enough, you hire a really good developer to work with you. But many of these games just don't cut it, especially compared to popular games out there today. So you've really got to make that game engaging, and people aren't necessarily motivated to learn about health. We know in our research that knowledge and skills are boosted in games that are designed that way. And there's a lot of interesting research on cognitive abilities, on the abilities of gamers who are rehearsing visual acuity skills, problem-solving skills. And gamers do have tremendous skills. And basically the skills that they rehearse in games, they are enhancing through their experience. There's even some interesting research about endoscopic, is that the word, endoscopic surgery? Did I get that? No.
Laparoscopic.
Laparoscopic. I knew that was the wrong word. Laparoscopic surgery. So, you're using tools to, it's like a game in a way. So just the tests that the medical students go through to hone their skills, tying a suture and that sort of thing, the gamers do better at that. The doctors who are gamers. And they've done studies to show that when doctors play an adventure game, fast-moving game before they do surgery, they do a better job. So your doctors play your games, and then you may do your surgery. Just very interesting things. I mean, there's so many offshoots. The idea of the immersiveness. Have any of you ever heard of the game Snow World? This is for burn victims when they're having very painful procedures, like their bandages are being changed. And it's just very painful. So First-Hand Technologies, Howard Rose and his crew created a way to see a virtual world just by looking through kind of goggles, you don't have to put the headset on. So the burn victim in bed in the hospital looks through the goggles and is immersed in Snow World. The snowmen, snowballs, penguins, woolly mammoths, ice, snow, cold. And it's a challenging little game, not really hard, but it's enough to kind of immerse you. And they're having these painful procedures. Their perception of pain goes down. Even fMRIs are showing that the pain centers are not firing off as much. So the applications for health are, I'm very interested in helping regular people, quote unquote patients, take care of themselves better for healthy lifestyle and management of chronic diseases and so forth. But for the diagnosis and the treatment of disease, and training doctors, simulations to help a hospital figure out what are they going to do when there's some kind of emergency, there's an earthquake or there's an epidemic, and you have to totally reuse your resources in the hospital to optimize for your crisis. And so all of these ways to really help medicine improve are very exciting. And treatment as well. Again, I mentioned failure is part of what you expect. And so this young man, he has that sting of defeat, but he's just going to get right back in there. And I'm very interested in the aspect of self-efficacy and self-confidence. We see this again and again. When you're rehearsing health skills in a game, the asthmatic kids and teens playing Bronchi the Bronchiosaurus, their self-efficacy for their own asthma self-care goes up. They're rehearsing those skills, they see that they can do it, it comes to the front of their mind, and we see great outcomes after playing that game. I'll tell you more about it. I love this picture. The social aspects of games are, we know that more and more people are playing social games online. I know, Magda, this is an interest of yours. Here is in senior living centers around the country, I think it's on Tuesday nights, there's a Wii bowling league. And they compete against other centers online. And here it shows them with their bowling shirts and their nicknames, their team names. And it's quite something. You can go to YouTube and look this up, and you'll see sort of spoof videos about, as if it's Sports Center. And it shows each of the players and, how tough they are. But, it's just all good, It's really great. And then, there's research about exergames, games that make you move, showing actual improvements in heart health and fitness, even endothelial function, your arteries are functioning better, your ability to process oxygen, I'm skipping ahead to a slide, but there was a study done in West Virginia, which a very poor state and a very overweight state, no money for PE classes in the public schools. What are they going to do? So they did a huge study of Dance Dance Revolution, the dance pad game, and found these great heart health outcomes. And so they bought DDR for every school in the state. And they're integrating that into classrooms and PE a little bit, if it exists. So, and then now with mobile games, Zombies Run and all these games that motivate you to keep running while you're out there in the world. The intergenerational aspects of games are very interesting. Grandparents and parents are asking their kids, can we play that game together, rather than sort of begrudgingly playing when the kid wants to play a game with them. Therapy, here's a stroke patient using the Wii balance board and playing a hula hoop game, immersed in it. And a game can simply be a springboard for discussion and support. A game doesn't have to have lofty health behavioral outcomes. It may just get people talking. One thing that we did with Bronchi, the American Lung Association loved our outcomes with Bronchi, and the fact that our kids were drawing pictures of Bronchi and sending it to us, and really establishing a personal relationship. And so the American Lung Association put Bronchi on the web. This was like only 2 or 3 years after the web even started, with browsers. So Bronchi had a website and answered medical questions that kids wrote in. And they had support groups online, and Bronchi would be part of the group and would answer their questions about asthma. So there's a concept called transmedia that's very popular in the humanities and social sciences, that we have characters that we like, storylines that we like, and now they can appear on more than one medium. It could be on TV, in the movies, and games, and and so on. And Bronchi was a transmedia character, and we brought his story to many different platforms. Games are icebreakers that foster closer relationships. One thing we found, we worked with pediatric asthma specialists, pulmonologists at Stanford, and we worked with endocrinologists on our diabetes game. And they would have the game in their waiting room, and the kids would be playing the appropriate game for their condition. And then the doctors were finding that the kids were much more forthcoming in the actual visit about telling the doctor what was bothering them. And that it was a real icebreaker. And the doctors were really smart because they play the game with their young patients. And they, for once, were not the expert. They let the youngster be the expert for them, which really bonded them in a nice way. And the doctor wasn't some god that the kid was kind of intimidated by. It was a pal, and in fact, let me tell you, pal, how to play this game. You know, you're a failure here. So just so many ways that games can really open things up. You know about the fact that we have, you know, the cloud and mobile and GPS, and you put them all together, and they're great things you can do with games. And now sensors and sensing all kinds of physiological states and vital signs and geoposition and so forth can really make for some interesting games. I've told you my interest is in being a character or helping a character. It influences our self-concepts, our attitudes about health. I want that character to be a lot like me about each player. But another aspect of that is nurturing of characters. And I did a study of a game, you'll see a picture of, actually the one on the right. This is Remission, which was a game for teens and young adults who have cancer. It's made by a nonprofit, wonderful organization in the Bay Area called Hope Lab. And this is a first-person, well, kind of a second-person shooter game where you play the role of Roxy, who's a nanobot. She goes inside the bodies of cancer patients, and she's shooting at marauding cancer cells, shooting chemotherapy. And in some episodes, she's shooting antibiotics at bacteria and offering other treatments. But I did a study of this game. This game was meant for the cancer patients. And again, I'm jumping ahead of my slides, but they did a large-scale clinical trial showing that adherence to your cancer treatment plan improved significantly if you played this game. Your self-efficacy for cancer, self-care, your knowledge of cancer went up, you know, if you were a cancer patient in the trial compared to controls. But I said to Hope Lab, I think this game could also be a prevention game for healthy young adults who don't have cancer. Because you are seeing cancer cells multiplying and coming at you. And if you fail to get every last cell and then you move somewhere else in the body, what happens is you get back there and then they've multiplied. So I did a study to show that healthy young adults, pre versus post, significantly increase their intentions to have a healthier lifestyle to prevent cancer, their perception that cancer was a severe condition, that they were susceptible to cancer, all those things that we as behavioral health people know lead to behavior change. Then what I did next was I said, well, nurturing, you know, Hope Lab, you did a really great thing because Roxy is helping a real patient. There are 9 different patients with 9 different kinds of cancer. And each time you see their picture, it's a teen, kind of older teen, who has a different kind of cancer, and you just see one screen with their face. And then you say, all right, here's John, go for it, help his cancer. I said, what if we modified the game, and what if we recorded some teenager guy's voice, and he would say, thank you for helping to combat my cancer. And what if we said, John loves to play this sport, this musical instrument, whatever, and his hopes and dreams are to someday become so there's a whole story. There's someone you start caring about. And so then we also made a version of the game where we took all of that out. And all you were doing was, please shoot chemotherapy at cancer cells in the human body. And you didn't see that it was a patient. There was no name or face attached to it. And if we have time, I'll show you the outcomes. But significantly stronger outcomes when you are nurturing a patient. And we actually had a hypothesis about that other condition where what you're left at is a shooter game, shooting cancer cells. I said, well, you're left with a game mechanic of shooting, right? But it's sort of a health mechanic too, of it's kind of implicit that you're saying that chemotherapy is a valid way to fight cancer. So let's see if people in that condition, maybe more than the other condition, which had all this drama and emotion and empathy going on, maybe there's a purpose for that shooter game. And indeed, all the attitudes about chemo were much higher for the group that didn't have all the nurturing stuff in it. So, and that helped Hope Lab design their later games about cancer. So here we are again making avatars that look like us. Here's the We has, you can make your own character called the me. And a few studies have shown that when people have their character that they've created with just, a few different hairdos, a few different eyes and noses and so forth, you can really make it look like you. And here's someone who made the Beatles, and you can see the resemblance. So, people identify with their character more, and that leads to better attention, more arousal, more learning, all the things we want as educators and behavioral people. So there's a lot of very interesting research on avatars. How much time do we have? I can show you a short video of what was done at Stanford of just having someone run in place with looking at an avatar that has your face on it. Do you want it?
Sure.
Okay. So I want to get to the internet. Can I do that? Is that hard? Or actually, I can just, I'm sorry, click. Oh, how do I get out of this? Oh. So if I just click on this, will it open the internet for me? What am I trying? Okay. But anyway, the whole idea is we're trying to get people to, there we go. Is there sound?
It's on the wall there.
We lost our video. And I do want to get to know all of you. So, and I will be here after the talk, so we can talk one-on-one. And also interrupt with questions as we're going along if you'd like. So at Stanford, that's where I got my degree. Jeremy they built in this wonderful virtual lab, and he's doing a lot of interesting work with, the avatar experience in VR.
Now we don't hear anything, huh?
Yeah.
We heard a little something at first. We just needed volume.
Yeah, the volume is up, but it's not.
So anyway, the upshot is, this is a little news piece. So she's putting on the goggles, and they've put her face on an avatar. So there she is. And all she has to do is run in place. Okay.
Sorry, we can't hear the other one.
Can you hear that?
Continue to see the rewards of your exercise. And your avatar will lose weight. I exercise,
His
and
hips
my
get narrow.
has gotten thinner. Her waist wiggling, her thighs shrinking. While the interesting growth you can see it right before your eyes. You think, wow, if I just keep going, I'll fit into my skinny jeans.
Did you hear that? She has to fit into her skinny jeans.
Studies with 100 subjects each time. And the preliminary results show that watching your virtual body change when you exercise can have a dramatic impact.
People exercise more in the lab, and then 24 hours later, when we ask them how much they've exercised on their own, they report exercising approximately an hour more in that 24-hour period.
And it didn't just motivate people who needed to lose weight. Aisling Lowe-Doyle, a former ballet dancer who finds traditional workouts boring, says that lingering image of her larger, heavier avatar gets her to the gym.
An image that has stuck with me, and I don't want to see myself getting bigger like I did that day.
Professor Balinson sees an easy next step from the laboratory to your gym. An avatar you watch on a TV screen while you're on the treadmill.
Anything you can envision, you can make your avatar.
Lost my breath. A vision of a healthier you that could turn illusion into reality. For today, Chris Jansen, Palo Alto, California.
And when we come back to Olympic gold medalists doing a little swimming out on our...
Here we go. And how do I get that to the sides? Oh, great. Okay, great. So that's the ultimate refrigerator picture. You know, when you're on a diet, you put a picture on your refrigerator. Or some people put someone overweight, and I don't want to go there, or someone at the ideal size, but to have this avatar of you looking heavy and thinner, I think that's really great. Okay, I'm going to skip a lot of the theory stuff, but I do want to make the point that we're constantly reading about theories of behavior change, theories of learning, theories of how people interact with multimedia. what's arousing, what's riveting, and we bring that into the design of games. We want to make the games fun, but challenging and interesting. So one of them, for example, is theories of self-referential encoding. So I read, we remember more when we learn about a topic in reference to ourselves. We do. We're just, there was a study, for example, of showing smokers, randomly assigning them either to look at pictures of diseased lungs of smokers or their own diseased lungs. And guess who is more likely to quit smoking, right? The more you can kind of say, well, that's happening to other people and not to me, then the motivation isn't there. But when it's right there and it's you, then you're talking, right? So how do we bring that into games in a way that's really going to motivate people? So, for example, so there are tons of theories, and I don't have time to go into that. Here's another one, seeing yourself in the future. A study was done where college students had an avatar, image of themselves. Half were randomly assigned either to see their current age or to see themselves aged. There's aging software now. And they were learning about saving for retirement, which is an alien concept to someone in their 20s. It just, retirement, that will never happen, right? And so the only difference in this educational, intervention was the image of yourself on the screen. And so then they were asked at the end, what percentage of your income are you going to save for retirement? And of course you can predict those who saw their older selves were going to save more money. I got to take care of this old geezer of me, later on, and it became real. I also believe that we need to embody and visually demonstrate our concepts. We're just such visual creatures. Words kind of flow over us, talk flows over us, but when you see a picture, that sticks with you, or even better yet, an immersive environment. But this is just another example of just how we can create media that can get at the way someone might be thinking. There's a whole area of study called aspirational avatars, which really it suits the health field very well, but also games for social change or even games for learning, where you maybe create your avatar explicitly to be what you want to be, not what you think you are now. And that serves as a role model for you as you play, or as Jeremy says, as you wear that avatar. You're embodying some future idealized self. And on the other hand, this is Second Life. As you know, in Second Life, everybody makes their own avatar, and every creature, person you see walking around is controlled by a person. So a study was done just to give young people an idea of what it feels like socially to be overweight, to get a little more understanding of overweight people. So literally, when you made your avatar heavy, other avatars would kind of tend to ignore you, as what happens in real life, and maybe say unkind things. And so you're going to get to experience this in a way that's sort of safer, but it has a reality to it, and it's a lesson in deeper understanding. Here's Bronchi, the American Lung Association's mascot for kids, and his sidekick Trachea, the Triceratops. When the concept of Bronchi, when I joined Click Health, they already had a picture of Bronchi, and they said, well, Bronchi's neither male nor female. I said, well, first of all, Bronchi has slim hips. That's a he, But anyway, don't do that. Let's have a female character, and why don't we also give Trachea different skills so that when you play Bronchi can jump high. So you have to traverse all these chasms and climb and swing through vines and do all kinds of things. Bronchi can get up high, but Trachea can't. But Trachea can jump far. So it really became two different games because you have to learn the pathway that each character can do. And what's interesting is, boys like to play male characters, and they tend not to want to play female characters unless it gets them something. Like in World of Warcraft, boys and men play female characters because other players help females more than they help males. So every player has a female version or female character that they play when they think they want help, right? But on the other hand, girls will play either. You know, they're in a man's world, and you know they're not all hung up about that, and they'll play the male character, but they were delighted to have a female character too. Also, got into a big fight with the artists. We paid a lot of money for this. This was the cover of our Nintendo box where the cartridge came in, and I said we got to have an asthma inhaler front and center. And they said, "What a buzzkill! You're not going to have a medical device on a video game?" And yeah, we do. And it was only for the kids who have asthma, and they loved it. One of the things we were getting at with our games for these kids with chronic conditions was to reduce stigma and to make it okay for them to talk about it with their friends, to self-care in front of their friends, and not feel like they had to hide in the shadows. And so this was a big hit to see this on the package. I'm very interested also in playing a game inside your own body. Right now we could take your health history, we could take your current medical tests, we could take whatever sensors are on you right now, and you could play a game inside your own body with your medications, your weaknesses, your allergies and whatever, and then you're playing to save yourself. I mean, I think that would be the most compelling thing. And then, of course, you want to play in other bodies. So what about somebody who has this health problem or that health problem? But for the most part, what we did with these games, with I'll tell you about the diabetes game. We enabled people to have either insulin twice a day or 4 times a day, a fixed dose or a variable dose, and that was all the memory of that cartridge could handle. I mean, it was really, we had to make trade-offs to save memory, but. That was just a rudimentary version of what we can do now, which would be to have the exact medication and dosage and timing and so forth for you, so it becomes like you. And in fact, people played our game, the type 1 diabetes youngsters played our game for 6 months without lagging, whereas even the most popular game in the entertainment world sort of has a 3-month life cycle. People play it a lot and then they peter off because they've won the game and they're on to something else. Well, why do you keep playing it? Well, it's because this game is my life. Very, very different thing. They're playing it to kind of, think about their life and to share it with their non-diabetic friends. And that makes me think about how soldiers in Iraq and Afghanistan are in combat all day. They go back to the barracks, and what do? They play combat games because they have control over it. And they can kind of process what they've been through in a more controlled way. So I make that connection with people playing games about their own health conditions. All right, I just don't want to be too didactic here, but there are lots of different ways that we can design games to be effective, and I'm just touching on a bunch of things. Let me just go really fast. I don't need to tell you that research is important. So here are the 3 games that we made for Super Nintendo and actually did some research on at Click Health. And for diabetes, we had 2 elephants named Packy and Marlin. Yeah?
So this is interesting, but I think we're missing something really fundamental when it comes to the role of, let's talk about physical activity, for example.
Sure.
So we're trying to reteach people an activity which was natural to the environment in which we evolved as human beings.
Yes.
And that's gone. So the reasons that people exercise was because they had to. And it seems to me that what we're missing so far is we're kind of using predominantly behavioral theory like self-efficacy and all that stuff. And we may be forgetting about the physiological implication of exercise and the combination, at least in the case of exercise, of the actual physiological feedback mechanisms that go to the brain.
Mm-hmm.
So the pleasure of exercise has to overcome the stress of exercise, or else you won't do it.
That's right.
So I think the games could, because of what you just said, because now we have the opportunity to make things visually and stuff that we couldn't do before. You could try to think, well, what is it about exercise, like escaping from a predator? The example you gave, for example, of the young woman who exercised because she wanted to be fit is sort of the dopamine hypothesis of reproductive stuff. I want to be more attractive. That's why I'm willing to do this.
Right.
So I think so far, and I'm not, I don't read the gaming literature so much, but I've seen this kind of gap.
Yeah.
We haven't really started to create
That's a-
games that really
I think
link that.
we should definitely do that. I mean, Zombies Run is maybe an example of running from a predator. There actually is a game for, you take your mobile phone, you're running, and you're engaged in a narrative where you have some vital role to deliver something, to save the world. And then the zombies are after you, and you've got to run.
So the question is,
But it could be other things in understanding more deeply.
right, and the trick would be to create a change in the person's behavior so that they wouldn't need the game to
That's
have
right.
the pleasurable experience of exercise.
Absolutely. In fact, there's a gateway effect that's hypothesized that, these extra games, when we've seen it anecdotally, sedentary, overweight people, they won't go walk, they won't play tennis, but they will play DDR, and that, they suddenly realize they feel better, and then they start exercising. So we're trying to get at that in some of our studies to see if, the initial exercise is going to get them further. And I've been reading also just about interventions where you have people exercise, sedentary people who, when they exercise, that there is an increase in their voluntary exercise in their daily lives. I think what you're talking about is fascinating and deserves some deep study, and to figure out where could a game or media be helpful, or there might be some aspects of what you're talking about where a game just isn't going to do it. But wherever a game could help, we'd love to think about that, and it can be part of a larger intervention. So I encourage everybody to be, to say, well, what's missing, like what you're doing, and say, what are some better ways to learn about health? This idea of, because you want to look thin, it's kind of fun and it makes the headlines, but it's not really, shouldn't be the fundamental motivation, your looks. Although it turns out that, smoking campaigns, weight loss campaigns, they all have found that it's more motivating, especially for young people, to focus on how you look rather than how you feel, or your health outcomes, which is kind of a sad commentary.
It's because the biological thing is dopamine, and it's, we're all designed to reproduce. And things that we associate that make us more ultimately reproductive as a species
Yes.
are very, very attractive and compelling.
Yeah.
That's what I think, that when you describe that, that's what I was thinking about.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense to
Because
me.
people wonder, why does it, you take an animal like a cheetah or something, and it has to figure out how much energy it should put into chasing
Right.
after an animal.
That's
So
right.
it's ultimately sort of a dopamine exchange in the brain. And it seems to me that this tool is also a way of studying what the physiological responses are
Yes.
that optimize ultimately the game that you're trying to do.
I absolutely. No, I think that's very wise. Very wise. And I think we have tools to, address some of these questions. But, look, theories from and knowledge from all kinds of fields should feed into our decisions about how to design games. So thank you for that. Any other thoughts along those lines? Let me breeze through a little more slides and then turn on the lights and forget the slides. I wanted to make one point, is that in the games that we made 20 years ago for the Super Nintendo, which was the console of the day, we decided to base them on algorithms. So with diabetes, the algorithm was, food brings blood glucose up, and insulin brings it down. And you've got to, you're in 4 simulated days with 3 meals and 3 snacks per day. And you're given a menu, and you see food all around you, and you have to use food exchanges if you don't see the exact food you need, but you have to get all your food groups. And you get a cumulative record of how you're doing, if you stay in the okay zone, high or low. And if you're too high or too low, your characters cannot win the game as easily. And with asthma, it was peak flow, breath straight. You start at a 9 and you go down a notch. 9, 8, 7 are in the green zone, 6, 5, 4 yellow, 3, 2, 1 are red, and in each case you better do something to help your character. If you're in the red zone, all you can do is call for help because the screen is getting progressively dark. And Bronchi's wheezing and can't do anything. And so your meds won't help you, you gotta call for help. But again, it was very rudimentary, just simplistic things. I'd like to see much more nuanced and individualized experiences with your own body and your own treatment plan. Okay, more theory, where we draw our work from. And this is a list. What we did was, when working with our Stanford docs advising us about the games, we asked them, what are the half dozen or so things that you wish your patients would do better? We actually asked them for about a dozen, and then we picked a half dozen that we thought the game could address. And so these are our lists. This is for asthma, and I won't go into details about how we addressed each of these, but trying to be as thoughtful as, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but as you are, about really thinking about what you're trying to achieve and why. And then here's the list for diabetes. And then also to really have an idea of what your goals of the game are, but also then how are you going to design the game to influence these mediating factors. So for the two games I've been talking about, we address self-concept, self-efficacy, knowledge and skills, and communication and social support. And there are aspects of each game that really went after that. But your model could have all kinds of changes that you want to see in the player that you hypothesize will lead to better health behaviors, and which will lead to better health outcomes. So our Packy and Marlin game with the 4 simulated days, it wasn't designed to teach you how to take care of your diabetes. Everybody is taught that, these patients were at Kaiser and were at Stanford, and they had clinics. They go in quarterly. They get all kinds of good care and guidance. They didn't need to learn, but they needed to be motivated to carry out the behaviors. And so we thought about stigma. We thought about just rehearsal of skills, communication with others, and all that sort of thing. So our trial was, we had 59 patients. We randomly assigned them to either take home our game or an entertainment game with no health content. And we all gave them all a Super Nintendo console deck. And we said, you can play your game as much or as little as you want, as long as you follow your parents' rules about video game play, when and for how long. And we knew some of these kids weren't gamers. They wouldn't play. And we also knew some of these kids were at perfect control. They had nowhere to go. They were at ceiling, which was fine. We wanted it to be naturalistic. We wanted to be able to say to the insurers of the world, if you just give this game away to all of your type 1 diabetic youngsters, here's the outcome you're going to get. You don't have to cherry pick the ones you think are going to need the most. So what we found was, after 6 months, we also were looking at an immediate kind of an outcome. So we looked at urgent care and emergency visits related to diabetes. So your blood sugar's gone too high or too low, and you need to see a doctor right away. And so the control group started, as the treatment group did, at about 2.5 visits per child per year. And 6 months later, after playing an entertainment game at home, they didn't change. But those who had our game had a 77% reduction in their urgent care visits. So they were down to a half of a visit per child per year. So just in kind of mundane, practical terms, they were saving about $2,000 per patient per year in unnecessary clinical visits, emergency visits, which are very costly. That kind of put us in the headlines, and it got us a CEO who was a founder of Activision, and all of that. It was quite something to see it go. With our bronchi game, we were finding in several trials that were done in clinics around the country, approximately 35 to 40% reduction in urgent care visits related to asthma. We also looked at the children's missed school days and the parents' missed work days because of their kid, and they were all in that 35 to 40% range. Okay, DDR, I told you about that study already in West Virginia. Squire's Quest is a game played in school, a really cool design, and outcome was increasing servings of fruits and vegetables by almost 1 serving per day per child, 0.91 servings. Remission is the one that is for teen and young adult cancer patients. And they did a randomized controlled trial with 375 cancer patients, and they found out good outcomes in knowledge, self-efficacy to communicate about cancer and manage side effects, and their adherence to the treatment plan. They even they did blood draws to see how much of their oral chemotherapy was actually circulating in their blood, and so forth. I'm going to skip over these other studies, where I showed, cancer knowledge improved. And these were the studies I did with the healthy young adults. And you can see I've gotten significant findings. Caring about patients in a game, if you had that version of the character that you were nurturing where you knew their backstory and their picture and their voice. A sense that this could happen to me went up when you cared about this defined character. And here's the mechanics of the cure with the ones who had just the shooter game. They were stronger on the chemo questions. I'm going to skip because I want to just talk with you. Spontaneous questions while people were playing. I love this. I really don't want this guy to have cancer. Did we heal him? I'm so excited. I feel like I'm helping somebody, not just playing a video game. I'm saving someone's life. So, these games are rudimentary in a lot of ways. We can do a lot better. But we are seeing that we're tapping into strong drives and motivations and interests of our players. And I would love to build on that and make, the ultimate kinds of health games. Just blah, blah, blah. Media are similar to real life, as I said. We feel present in media worlds. We truly experience the events. And I want to bring you back to my original proverb, involve me and I understand. Real good watchwords for what we're doing. And games are worlds where we live. And people are playing games hours a day. My study is finding, more than an hour a day on average. I calculated how many person years a day in America we're spending playing games. I have to get that number just on the tip of my tongue, but person years, amazing that we're playing games. So let's play, valuable, good games that are actually going to help us and really give us a great entertainment experience too. Nothing wrong with that. So here's my contact information, and let's turn on the lights and talk. If you still have time to stick around. Is that the light over here?
Yes.
All right. So you talk. Questions, disagreements, anecdotes. What are you doing here? What are you doing in games? Yes.
Here's an anecdote.
Okay.
So we were involved in a study that was started in 2001 to prevent obesity and type 2 diabetes in children. Tom Baranowski was one of the PIs at the time. And we had a big debate about whether to take the Squire's Quest idea, which was Tom, and to use it as the intervention. And this was, a while ago, so we didn't have the sophisticated kind of game. So when we introduced this idea, the concept, the school said, so we're trying to keep the kids to be more physically active, and you're going to have them play another video game. So we didn't do that. And I don't think we were ready to do that.
Yeah.
I don't think the world was ready for a game that would have compelled the students to really do this.
Yes.
So my worry also was, if you watch a really great PE teacher, a really great PE teacher,
Yeah.
I haven't seen a game that can do as good a job.
Yeah.
as a really
Yeah.
great teacher.
I believe it.
So where do we put our money?
That's right. Very interesting question. Sometimes you want to think about where games can supplement where there's no better alternative, right? Or where they might supplement during free time when the kids wouldn't have their PE teacher anyway. You know what I mean? But you certainly don't want to shoot yourself in the foot and give them a worse experience than they could have had otherwise. Yeah, but these are all really important questions. It's very complex to figure out who your target population is, what's really going to reach them, and what harm are you doing, and is it worth it? And all of these are really important. So Tom worked on Escape from Diab and all of that.
That's where Escape from Diab came from. Anecdotes, you said we could do anecdotes. So the NIH put out a call for grants to see if they could develop a game for our study, and that's the Diab is Escape from type 2 diabetes.
Yes.
Because that's what the study was all about.
Fantastic. What's your name?
Dan Cooper.
Dan Cooper. Are you going to have time to stick around?
Maybe.
No. Okay. Love to talk anymore.
Don't let David Rankensmeyer talk. He's that guy over there.
Oh,
Yeah. Actually,
yes.
hi, how's it going? I kind of follow on what Dan was saying. I do robotic rehabilitation for people with stroke. And in the clinical testing, the first stage was kind of showing that the robotic therapy device had a positive effect. And then people started then comparing it to other types of training that you could do.
Right.
And it seemed like in the studies you showed, you're kind of in that first stage still, where it's just like the game versus a game without health content.
Right.
Versus what Dan is saying,
Like,
where you could
treatment
compare
as
the.
usual, yeah.
Well, even just another clever way to do something.
Sure.
So
Yeah,
are there
absolutely.
studies that have controlled that way, where you compare it to, you know, a parent coaching the kid, you know, with some strategy or something in the
Yeah.
asthma case, or,
Right.
Yeah.
You know, in the education world, that's
Yeah.
done a lot.
yeah.
And one of the criticisms is sort of an apples and oranges.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, I suppose if it was, you know, lots of different parents just coming up with ideas,
Yeah.
that would be okay. But, you know, when you have the teacher in front of the class versus some cool multimedia product that costs millions to make with, you know, curriculum specialists, you know, poring over every moment
Mhm.
versus the teacher, you know, and then, of course, it depends on what you're measuring. If you're measuring their ability to spit back, you know, factoids, maybe the multimedia does better, but maybe there's some spark that the teacher ignites in the student that you're not measuring, right? So it's hard to compare them. But I think the question should always be asked, you know, is this the best intervention available, or is there something better?
Mhm.
I have not seen a lot of those kinds of comparisons in the health field.
Mhm.
For some reason, I don't know why. You know. Yes.
Well, I think it would be a mistake to say, like, if there's anyone best, especially in the exer game sort of area, because the point isn't to take away PE teachers, and the point isn't, like, to make everyone play a game.
Right.
Kind of the point of exer games is to show people that there's more than one way to exercise, because when people become adults and they start to no longer exercise and they start to feel the need to get into exercise again, the first thing that they go to is running. And oh, how I hate running,
Right.
and I don't want to run, and then they give up because they hate running.
Yes.
But running isn't the only exercise. So I think it's a mistake to say, is there anyone best? There's no killer app, there's no, like, one way to do exercise, and I think that our point shouldn't be that there's one way to do exercise.
That's a very good point. You know, another question I often get is, well, how long do these effects last, right?
Yeah.
And it's a very valid question. You know, Jeremy Valenson, next day they exercised an hour more, right? Well, what about 5 weeks later? You know, and if nothing, then was that a waste of time? You know, but I think it was Tom Baranowski actually who made this comment to that question. You know, you teach a first grader how to read, you're giving them various lessons week after week. You don't expect one lesson to teach them how to read. It's cumulative, it builds. And so our health media are one part of the mix, and we can keep making media that bring people along. It's not just a one shot and then you're all set kind of a thing. And you know, as I pointed out earlier, sometimes what you want to do is maybe just reduce this feeling of stigma, and that will help improve behavior. Or you just want to get people to realize that one form of exercise feels good. Or you just want to be a springboard for discussion. That's all your game is going to do. And why is that not good enough? I mean, I suppose if it was very expensive to do it, and not many people played it, there would be reasons to argue against it. But just as part of the mix of our health interventions, there's a lot of different aspects we can get at. But we need to be asking these questions and coming up with the best bang for our buck, too. You know, in relation to your question, too, everybody's different, too. There's no one fix for everyone. So,
Right, in
you
an
know,
ideal
it's
world,
hard
you would know enough about the different interventions that and then you could target them to different people, or you could say, target's kind of a harsh word, but you could say,
Yes.
this is probably gonna work better for you.
Right.
I mean, but I was just trying to get a more sense for where the field is in terms of, it seems like it's showing effects, but it's not really showing, like, it's better than something else right now.
That's right. You know, what we
That's
need to-
reasonable.
You know what
Yeah.
we should do? I'm sure there's great
Yeah.
literature about
Yeah.
coaching and teaching and mentoring and inspiring, you know,
Yeah.
leading. And, you know, all those things that teachers do or that, you know, health educators do. And, you know, what is that? And maybe our games aren't getting at that.
Yeah, I think that's.
And then
that's
just
right,
say, you know, can we make a game that, you know, maybe encourages people to go talk to a mentor or take a class, you know?
Yeah.
You know, if that's the best way for some people, maybe we ought to push for that and then explain that. And then also do a study comparing one and the other. And maybe showing that, you know, the rehearsal of skills in a private setting where you're learning to take care of your diabetes
Yeah.
and you're still not out of the closet with your friends with it and so forth, that may be the perfect thing and nothing else will do. But for others who are out of the closet and all that, they need a mentor. So that's actually a great idea. Yeah. But sorry, nobody's doing that. And if they did, believe me, it's, oftentimes there are studies that you just kind of look at it and you just go, forget it, small n, apples and oranges. One was better than the other on these measures, so what? Yes?
You talk about you're interested in the field of self-efficacy with these games and how you can improve self-efficacy.
Yes.
So I'm also with Professor Rinkensmeyer in the field of rehab robotics. And with robots now you can make people or help them do what they're no longer able to do.
Yes.
And so you can go to the clinic and help them out, or a trainer could do that. But then when you take them out of this training environment, then maybe you can increase their self-efficacy while they're being helped. But can you comment on what you would expect when these people go out of training and then they're faced with their inability to do something again, and how that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I'm no expert on that, but it makes perfect sense that if you're going to give them some fabulous assistance and then it goes away, unless they've been scaffolded and they're able to be independent without the help, that's good. You want to take that help away, but if it's their lives are going to be worse afterwards, you got to think about the ramifications of that. I don't know. I mean, is a little bit at first better than nothing ever?
Right.
That's a good question. Right?
I could see how that could, become part of the game and part of the challenge. It reminds me of the fairly classic trope that seems to happen in pretty much every good first-person shooter where, when you're at your peak and you've got all your gear and your weapons and everything, they just take it all away from you.
Yeah.
And drop you back into the hardest part of the game with nothing.
Yeah.
And that doesn't tear away your self-efficacy, it builds it up, because what it shows you is, yeah, I've actually gotten better.
Yeah, I did it before.
These are my
I can do it again.
skills. These are my skills. It
Yeah.
isn't all this gear.
Right.
So
Yeah,
I think that if you're clever about how you do it.
Yeah, if the robot is there to help you be independent, then take the robot away at the appropriate time. Sure.
Yeah.
But I
Have the
sort of
robot
understand.
age and have less and less abilities. over
Yeah,
time.
yeah, but if you're going to suddenly be worse off because the robot is now gone, I think that was your question, right? It's like, you got to think about that. What is the benefit of having the robot a little bit of the time, but then be without it? Is it going to depress them? Is it going to make them feel defeated?
But if you have enough control over the stuff that they're doing and the tasks that they're doing, even when they're not in the robot, you could have them do a task at the beginning of their therapy.
Yeah.
And then practice in the robot. And then you're going to take away the robot, but you put them back in that familiar territory, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that's still part of whatever game you're doing. Maybe it's something else. But you put them back in that familiar territory, and you allow them to compare, to do the apples to apples comparison.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think that would make a good study. What happens? I think that there are many people in your field and others who'd love to know. Really good question. Anybody want to tell me about interesting projects you're working on, or yes, question? Yes.
I worked on a project about the intervention of physical activities for the diabetics and overweight in Switzerland, and we did a study for 6 months last year.
Yes.
And the patients, there are 20 patients. They wear this Fitbit for 6 months, and we interview them at the beginning and the middle and the end for how does this device, which we have also the gamification. It's not really a game.
Thanks, guys. See you later.
It's not really a game, but there are some gamification elements here. And at the end, the patients really show that we didn't ask for their glucose level, whether it changes or not. We're just interested in whether their behaviors has changed over the 6 months. And the results turn to be very positive, they start to realize there are little tiny steps and little behavior changes that can happen, habits that can happen. So that really encourages us. But that's just like a specific device which involves gamification elements. And so that's why I agree that it's a good way to get people started.
Yes.
I don't know whether that will be the ultimate goal, but that actually people expected that to be boring and difficult, and now they get started, and that's a good sign. And my question is, so for gamification elements that are included in the normal app or any other website for education purpose or health purpose versus like serious games or extra games. So what are the, how to say, to fulfill the goals, what do you think might be better and what are the pros and cons?
Oh my goodness. Well, it has to be fun. I mean, DDR, Dance Dance Revolution, was not made to be an extra game. It's just a fun game, and it got popular because it's just fun to do. So, you know, it has to be fun. I am a big believer in looking for intrinsic motivation and not extrinsic. So extrinsic are points, badges, rewards, and intrinsic is because you're doing something because it's important to you, right? So I might want to set up an extra game with some kind of, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, some kind of exercise where you're figuring out what's important to you and doing this because it matters to you. And not make the game so driven by points. Because once the points go away, if you're lucky, nothing happens. If you're not lucky, you can actually reduce intrinsic motivation. So people start feeling like, yeah, I want to exercise because it's important to me. And you're playing a game, points, it goes away, and then I was playing the game for the points. You know, there actually is a whole branch of psychology that looks at the hidden cost of reward. And so you got to be very careful about gamifying. That word gamification, I really don't like it because it's that branch of our field is taking a non-game and turning it into a game, like work, like you know, the workplace. And a study was done, for example, when people at a workplace and their job is gamified, like a call center, and then you have this game where how many calls can you make or some metric of your calling, people, their productivity drops. You know, they feel controlled. They feel like, you know, I didn't buy into this idea of being in a game. And then this whole idea that after you know the rewards are gone, then you're not into it at all. So that, you know, those are some warnings about what not to do. But how, you know, an interesting question would be, how would you make a game that brought on the intrinsic motivation? So it might be in the form of feedback. So you're playing a game that makes you sweat, and you could get feedback about, you know, hey, you've just burned 150 calories, you know, and or maybe you could show, again, visuals, maybe show belly fat, and maybe just some visual with belly fat melting away, or something, you know, to remind people that, you know, that there's a reason for doing this, and then, you know, and maybe as the visceral fat melts away, you start seeing the internal organs instead of them being covered with fat. You know, that might be a way to kind of motivate people to play that game, you know, and it's just something they take away with them, is that image, and that, yeah, I did that in the game, and I want to keep doing that. I mean, I'm just brainstorming here, but I think it's an important question, and one that should be tested. So let's say you came up with a question like that. I would create a prototype, test it with users, see if they responded to it. You know, there could be something really off-putting about that idea to people. They never want to play the game. Like, I don't want to think about my fat. I want to just play the game for fun, right? So there's a lot of research that needs to be done in the middle of your designing to just do a reality check with your users, players. But I don't have an easy answer for you on that. You know, but it's a good question.
And then there's another question. We know that we need to design games that are fun. So to be more concrete, like the design elements or design guidelines, are there like a number of them that you would recommend?
Yes, you know, it's funny you asked that. I'm on a grant right now from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and one of the things I have to do is on my website, the Center for Digital Games Research, we're going to have principles of game design, health game design. And I'm going to be, you know, talking theory to theory to theory to finding and saying, you know, competition, collaboration, you know, some of the things I've mentioned. So stay tuned is what I'll say, and to take a look. And I think if you Google principles of game design or health game design or learning game design, there are a number of articles out there where people are starting to bring those, you know, game mechanics and behavioral change principles into the writing and into the games. So you can find it out there. And I hope to be helpful by putting it all in one place.
Thank you.
Yeah. I
One more
don't,
question, because we have to get out of here by 4. That's-
oh, we do, okay, one more question.
Is there any like group to focusing on either elderly with a multiple chronic condition or mental health and improving the emotional mood and
Oh, there are a
depression?
lot, games for resilience, positive psychology, various kinds of mental health, phobia treatments. It's a huge, huge area.
But all the adults with multiple chronic conditions and
Multiple chronic
yeah,
conditions.
so many people, older seniors, they are living alone and lonely,
Right.
and then, but I did some like with the focus group with the older adults with the chronic condition.
Yes.
Actually, they don't like to play.
You see, you need to test it with them all along the way, so that you don't waste your time making a whole game that nobody wants to play. You've got to find the sweet spot, if there is any, and if not, maybe don't do a game, do something else. But multiple chronic conditions, there's budget, how many people are in that category of those chronic conditions, and who would pay for it. But I think that's a noble purpose. Wouldn't it be nice if you could say at the beginning, what are your chronic conditions? And you have 20 of them, and people click the ones that they have, and the game adapts just to that, combination of conditions. That would be quite an expensive game, but I think it's possible.
I guess the biggest problem is attracting people to the from gamers to the game designers to the extra game arena.
Yeah.
And that's I think the biggest problem we're facing.
Yeah, I think there's a way to interweave some kind of a storyline or personal assessment or something else that brings it home to you without detracting from the fun of the extra game. But it's not an area I've given a lot of thought to.
One more? Stop.
How do you deal with the challenge of introducing children to these educational games? Like we were talking about climate change and nutrition and stuff.
Yes.
Like how do you deal with the challenge of introducing just like the general public? Like,
well, this is where they live, right? Playing games.
Like based on all the examples that you gave us, it seems like you have games about cancer and they're targeted to cancer patients, and pretty much every example that you gave us was they're targeted to a certain group.
Yes.
So how do you target like the general public?
Yes, and I've been making a few nutrition games, a calorie counting game, and a cholesterol game, trying to find topics that affect all of us. But I think if the game is fun, the word gets out and people want it, and very often, especially in a formal setting like a classroom, students are like jumping up and down with joy when they get something that's fun and exciting to play. It doesn't matter what it's about. And we find people playing some of these chronic condition games like Bronchi who don't have asthma because Bronchi is fun to play just as a game. So I think there is a gap. I mean, there are many gaps, but one other one that we're identifying in this room today is just games that are good for everybody, about healthy lifestyle, right? And we need more of that so that anybody who picks it up could benefit from it. But in terms of, we use the word introduce, I mean, most people would be, oh, a game, I'm intrigued, at least to start. And if the game is good, it will keep your interest.
There's another way of turning the problem around, actually, which people are starting to use in classrooms, is having the kids actually design a game around the problem.
Exactly.
And then if you tell them, okay, let's design a game on, if you're in bio class, I don't know, a cell or something, and take the cell as an example, and how will you tell a 5-year-old about the cell or something? You will force them to think of it differently. And actually, it's sort of turning the problem around. Now, they may not play that game, but during that semester that they're learning about it, it actually forces them to think about it in much deeper terms.
Yes.
So it's sort of turning the problem around and say, okay, here it is, here's a problem. And we do that with our game jams in the club. We tell them, okay, take the theme of electricity, design a game around it. Or I don't know what, here we have a box of sensors. Come up with a game that will use all these sensors. And that's how we draw these kids into these games. Because otherwise, if I told them electricity, we would want to design a game around electricity. But I think for children, maybe one way of doing it is to actually turn the problem around and say, and they're doing it in math classes now, where they're saying, okay, here's a concept, design a game that will illustrate this concept.
the most
And you learn
Teaching.
so much more
By
doing
teaching,
that.
yeah.
By making them design the game that will actually teach the concept and actually having them play the game. Because the games, we have not yet reached a population where the people who design these games are the equivalent of Blizzard or Riot Games or League of Legends. And so turning the palm around actually makes it more interesting for these kids.
That's a great idea. The other thing would be to modify games. If we had tools that made it easy to modify games, here's a game, make it, make it teach something different, or make it better, or make it more fun for you. But just the whole notion of being the teacher as a way to learn is great.
And then evaluate at the end who created the best game, or who, whatever, how many concepts did you actually target with your game. And that's what, we found that sometimes works better with the younger population.
Well, listen, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
I'd love to talk with you out in the hall if you have more to ask or talk about. And I'd love to know more about what you're working on. So thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.